What's up, dogs? One of the goals I had when I quit my job in December was to build in public. That is, to be pretty clear and transparent on what I was doing and how it was going. It's an idea that I've been exposed to through indie hackers, and it's something I want to embrace for any business that I start. So this will be the first of 4 quarterly business reviews that I put out on this channel in 2021. If you don't care about that type of thing, you won't have to suffer through that many. In fact, if you're hyped for these, please go ahead and hit the thumbs up. Or if you're not, hit the thumbs down. I want to know genuinely if I should make more than just 4. As you might imagine, this topic is super important to me personally. It's what gets me excited, and the future of this channel will also be covered in these updates. I'll typically lead with that YouTube growth, assuming that's what you're most interested in, and the structure will continue from there. I'll give a quick update on my freelance gigs. I'll give an update on my runway, monetization, and all things money. Plans for the upcoming quarter, including content strategy. And finally, learnings where I focus on some big takeaways that I had, though I'll try to throw in some small practical tips as well for your photography. We'll jump in real quick now, but one last thing. I hope to learn a little bit more about you guys when dropping these 4 videos. So I'm gonna ask a question in each. Drop your current camera setup in the comments below. YouTube growth. In 2021, I set a goal to publish 24 videos or 2 per month. I'm always going to hit you with 1 video on the 1st of the month. Oops. And I'll try to get a mid-month drop on the 15th. Or in a weird, unplanned pattern, I'll miss and I'll drop 2 on the 22nd. Gotta keep you on your toes. Hit that notification bell so you get notified when I post new videos and you don't miss when I post on the 22nd instead of the 15th. Currently, I'm murdering that goal with 12 videos posted so far, so we're going to up that stretch goal to 48. Quick tip for fellow YouTubers, I wouldn't set only a subscriber goal. That's more of a vanity thing. Try to set a goal for the number of videos created. Focus on what you can control, and that's the content. And views are more important anyway, so subscriber goal is just kind of something for ourselves. Speaking of vanity metrics, at the time of scripting notes, we're sitting at 566 of you hooligans, and I say we're purposefully. If you've decided to stick around, thank you very much. I genuinely appreciate it. You've seen this little ticker before, and I'm confident that we can hit 1,000 by the end of 2021. If so, we'll double down on that goal as well. Good news for all of you coming to my channel through reviews. Those are going to be here to stay for the remainder of 2021. They are clearly bringing in the peeps. I'm getting good feedback on the to-the-point nature. I like making them, and specifically prepping shots and clips for the B-roll. Taking shots for the 2 RF 70-200 lenses was such a doozy and a whirlwind week of photography and editing, given that I only rented the f2.8 for a week. It was so fun though, and I knew people would want to see those comparison videos when the f4 dropped. It's rewarding that I was able to deliver and create the video that I would have wanted as a consumer, and to have that be my first video to hit 10,000 views is pretty cool. Yeah, so long story short, searchable reviews are going to be the backbone of how we get to 1,000 subscribers. One thing I think people miss when starting YouTube is that no one really cares about you personally when you start. I hope to trick you into caring about me at some point, so you'll watch whatever I make, but a good path is to target searchable content first. Slowly improve your thumbnails and your ability to provide value and keep people watching, and eventually you'll start to get a better feel for things. I would still like to cover the 35mm macro, the Samyang 14mm, the RP and how it compares to the R6, who should consider buying the R6, and how to use my affiliate link if you go on to do so. I also plan to continue to rent other lenses to try out more of the RF line and potentially compare to other manufacturers. This right here is the point where I'm realizing this is going to be a long ass video. So let's move on to the gig report. I've got some photo and video work, as you might imagine, and most of that is shooting coffee for recurring clients. Out of the 2 companies I shoot for, approximately 75% of that work is remote product photography. That's great because logistically we're still dealing with COVID, and it helps me work around other gigs. When I do get the chance to shoot on-site locally, it ends up being a nice change up as opposed to a nuisance with lots of travel. I've also started to do a lot more with podcasting this quarter. The tasks there are social posting, light audio and video editing, publishing workflow, general admin type tasks, and communicating with guests. I was really late to the podcast game as a listener, but I love them. Working to help produce them has been really fun and a great learning experience. On one hand, the podcasting landscape feels pretty saturated, but on the other, in my mind, there's still a wave of people that have yet to jump in and produce their own. So I think we still have yet to see a lot of small businesses jump into podcasting, in order to get their brands discovered and recognized. I see these gigs as important experiences for me to be able to help these businesses in the future. A huge benefit of working for a podcast is that if you're not involved in the on-site production, most of the other tasks are largely remote. And so when you're working in other gigs like photography and video, you can schedule around those. And a lot of the tasks that I have, I can batch according to my own schedule, so long that I hit the deadlines that are needed for production. If you're trying to get into photography, videography, or anything creative, and you're struggling to get those initial gigs, consider seeking out a small to medium-sized podcast and applying to help. If nothing else, you'll get some experience in the creative space and a small side income that you can use for taking courses, investing in gear, things like that. Damn, that's a nice segue. Speaking of money, let's talk about how little I'm making. And I'm gonna spend a little bit more time here for this first quarterly video, just to give you a little bit of context about my situation. When I left my job in December, I was working as a full-time data analyst. Over the past year, I had already sprinkled in some photo and podcast freelance work on nights and weekends, but I was really struggling to create time for that, time for my own content, time for learning, and to hold down the full-time job. I was really stressed with work, I was stressed with COVID, and frankly, I was just having a tough time keeping weeks close to 40 hours. It was more like 50 or more, but it always felt like I couldn't turn off. It was difficult to find time for vacation, and with COVID, it was spent at home, so it didn't feel rejuvenating. So that's the context of the situation that I walked away from. And financially, I was very lucky going into and throughout the pandemic. I've had an inkling that I was going to do something like this at some point. So in 2019, I switched from more aggressive student loan payments and stepped back and toward more saving cash for a rainy day, or to use for a runway. Little did anybody know that rainy day would be the COVID monsoon. So end of March, early April 2020, as it became clear that the coronavirus was going to create massive health and financial impacts, I pretty much just prepared to be laid off and tightened up all non-essential spending. The bigger things that I still ended up buying, like the Canon RP, were funded almost entirely from side income made from photography. On top of all that savings, I wasn't paying for hockey, wasn't paying for ice time, wasn't paying for equipment, and I obviously wasn't traveling and spending money on trips like I normally would. And so while I buckled down and prepared for worst case scenario, potentially losing my job early into the pandemic, the company I was at was relatively insulated, at least at that time, and seemingly through the whole duration until I left. And so with that chunk of savings, I decided around October 2020 that I was going to take a run at this freelancing and eat through my runway as a method to do so. At that time, I projected that if I made absolutely no money from freelancing, I could live until about May trying to work that out, get some gigs, work on my own content, and see what happened from there. Since I already had some income from the gigs that I had part-time, that was more of a conservative estimate, but I wanted to keep it that way in case any unexpected expenses came up. Now that we're coming up on May, my new goal is to try and squeak out all of 2021 in this freelancing experiment. So far, by the time Q1 ends in a few days, I'll have billed for about $4,500. On YouTube in this first quarter, I've made $161. So again, thank you for those using my affiliate links. It's a small trickle now, and compared to the time I spent on the channel, it works out to be $1 an hour, but I'm hoping that over time I can grow that trickle to a raging waterfall. For expenses, the biggest thing cutting into my runway is the rent, and the rent is too damn high, and thankfully I've just paid the last month on my lease, so looking forward to having that expense removed for the moment. Stopping that payment and the associated utilities is really going to stop the bleeding on my runway fund, and I'm excited for this next new chapter. I've been steadily slimming down possessions over the past few months to embrace a more minimalist approach, and it's very freeing. 11 out of 10 would recommend giving, selling, or chucking away the stuff that you don't use in order to free up some physical and mental space. Quite the thrill. So next quarter, what's coming up for me in Q2? I can already hear you wondering if I'll be living in my car. Well, yeah, kinda. I obviously won't have an apartment, so I'm going to rely on the generosity of the fam and crash around a few different places for the next several months. First stop is off to Colorado. I'm going to be driving and camping along the way. Next video is probably a look at some of the key things I'm packing for the trip. I've planned a route on my way out, haven't planned the way back in case I'm able to try and catch friends or plan paid gigs along the way. but I'm planning on this journey lasting a few months. And as far as the content strategy, I'm hoping to work this trip into my personal content. I've got some of these new 5 terabyte drives, so I hope to fill these bad boys up. And like I said, I have some reviews for the equipment I haven't yet reviewed on the docket as well. Doing some construction out there right now, if you can hear that, but we're gonna proceed. I've also made a placeholder for a new channel called Dan Joshua BTS. If you just can't get enough of me, you can saunter on over there. And if you're fast enough, you could be the first subscriber. I'm not exactly sure what will end up living there long term, but I hope to add behind the scenes vids, maybe lean into some vlogging style stuff. And if I'm able to nail down what I want my own podcast to be about, the video episodes, if I make them, or just the audio, will live on that channel for now as well. Like I said, I love that format. I'm not exactly sure what the overall topic of the podcast would be, but I'd love to talk about more of this journey if that's something that you guys are interested in. And I'd love to use it as a platform to bring on other freelancers and talk about their experiences as well. As far as the strategy for existing gigs that I have, I don't plan on that changing too much. Much of that work is remote, so it's going to be put to the test to make sure everything's still running smoothly. And I hope to be able to create some content for these brands while on the trip if possible. I'm also currently exploring some other affiliate groups and potentially sponsored work for video or social posts. There are definitely some products that I'm missing that would be key to have on this trip. I'll be excited to see that if at my size I can trade work for those things, or if pitching sponsorships and affiliates is even possible for someone with 500 YouTube subscribers and Instagram followers. And finally, the last stop, lessons learned. First big one, save now. Save yesterday, but save now. If you find yourself often daydreaming about quitting your job and freelancing, or quitting your job to work on something more creative while you're at your job, I can't help you. You're already too far down the rabbit hole to be rescued. Start saving for when you eventually try that so that it will be less stressful. That way you won't hamper your own creativity with worrying. You'll have time to try some of your own content. And at the end of the day, you'll just be able to give it your best shot. I know lots of people have been adversely affected financially by the pandemic, so it might not be possible, but any small trickle of savings you can set aside is really, really going to help later. Practice now. While you're prepping your runway fund, take this time to practice your creative skills, especially if you're like me and weren't technically trained in any of this junk. I'm nowhere near the photographer that I hope to become this year and someday, but picking up the camera almost every day has helped a lot. Practicing daily helps you build the skills and confidence that you'll need to get the first gig, and the first gig helps you get the next several. Finally, plan goals for your transition if that's something that you seek to do. It's hard to make big changes in a few months or even a year, but if you can keep some motivation toward the same thing for a few years, you can really start to see some progress. For me, in regards to the freelance journey, I've been using revenue goals. It started in 2019 when I just wanted to make $100. In 2020, I just wanted to make $1,000. While these milestones felt difficult in the moment, looking back, they were quite easy. My goal for 2021 was to make $10,000, but that was before I quit and started to do this full time. Because I've done so, and I am doing this full time, my stretch goal for 2021 is to gross $25,000. I doubt I'll hit that, but I like the revenue goals because at the top level, they necessitate these smaller goals and then actions that you need to complete in order to potentially hit these goals. My thought process is like, okay, to hit 25,000, I probably need another consistent gig. I may need to charge more. I may need to swap out one of the lower paying gigs. I need to start monetizing my own projects more. Or maybe I deprioritize and refocus the personal projects. It's not all about making money, but my motivator quickly became for this experiment to avoid going back to getting a day job. And money is the tool that I would use to avoid going back to a typical day job in my prior field. So when I expand that and say in 2022, I want to gross $100,000, in hopes of getting 50 after expenses and taxes, that's it. I've done it. I've bridged the gap between old day job and new day job. And so that fear kind of disappears. I'm talking aspirational stretch goals here. Obviously, it's not as easy to do that as it is to say it, but the same thought process applies. How many clients will I need to hit this? What will I need to be charging? Is YouTube a viable strategy for side income at this point or not? Can I make digital courses or assets for my audience? Can I hire part-time help to assist in the tasks that I no longer want to do? and give another creator a chance at starting their own part-time freelancing. At that point, in my mind, things start to get pretty exciting, so I'm hoping to achieve these goals. If you're still watching, you're a hero. Pick some goals for your own Q2 and crush them.